Hello and welcome to Unleashed. I'm your host, Will Bachman. You can find the transcript for this episode in the show notes at umbrex.com/unleashed, where you can also sign up and get notified of every episode that we published. I'm here today with Joe Pope, who is a partner and the director of business development at Hinge. Hinge works with professional services firms on their marketing and business development. Joe, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, Joe, I know that you have done some work on cold outreach with your clients, and obviously you do a lot of other
Yeah.
stuff in business development, but that's one area that I wanted to explore. Cold outreach is something that a lot of boutique consulting firms, independent consultants kind of struggle with, shy away from perhaps, and
Yeah.
interested to get your thoughts. Tell us about how do you talk to your clients about the right way to do cold outreach?
It's a really interesting question, and there's good reason why people shy away from it. Honestly, the the old method of just cold dialing and SDRs right out of school, just sending out call after call. It's developed a reputation, certainly. And while there is a great value in it, if it's not done correctly, you're not going to see ROI. You're not going to see the benefit of the amount of time in it. If you're outsourcing it, you're not going to see a return on the amount of money you're spending on those third parties. And so what is super important about any sort of outreach is that it is done as part of an overall strategy. It's part of your overall strategy, your overall business development strategy. And that plays into things like your marketing activities, your social media cadence, everything that goes into that. And that's part of the reason why a lot of organizations, even if they are doing it, they're not seeing success with it.
Okay, so talk me through what works. You've probably tried a bunch of things and seen a lot of
We
clients
have.
try different things. So give us the secret sauce.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think, like I kind of hinted at there, it really does come down to strategy. And just like any sort of activity that you're doing, whether it be an inbound content creation, webinar, whatever it may be, if it's not specifically targeted to the types of clients you want more of, your target audiences, then you're not going to find success. So, if you're familiar with Hinge, you'll know that we do quite a large amount of research into the professional services space. We do it for our clients, we do it for ourselves. But that research is done for a purpose, and it is to connect those dots, to make that connection, that gap between saying something and actually it resonating, to shorten it. So that's really where we suggest folks start when they are developing an approach to doing cold outreach. If you're not looking at and understanding the key issues and the topics and the channels that your target audience are in, then you're spending your time and your effort in the wrong places. We've done, like I mentioned, a lot of research in this space. For consulting organizations, we've asked a lot of questions around what is it that resonates most with the type of organization that you choose to work with. The number one factor, and it is far and away, is that they understand and have a knowledge of the industries that they're in, and their subject matter expertise is directly related to the issues that they face. So any sort of outreach that you do, in whether it's content creation or if it's you're sending LinkedIn messages, sending emails, if you're not mentioning those types of points up front and you're trying to lead with something else like, oh, I'll be your trusted advisor. Don't do that, by the way. That's a terrible idea. If you're not using that kind of message, you're very likely to fall victim of the sea of sameness. Because, I mean, well, I'm sure you get plenty of these messages in your LinkedIn email box every day. I actually have mine open right now. I have 5 direct outreach emails, basically all from a very similar type of person. I'm not going to read a single one of them. They're not targeted to me. They're obviously mass sent, or they're wanting me to own a franchise for some reason. But that is just not going to resonate in today's marketplace. We get too many messages. It's not something that's going to help. So that key element up front, understanding those issues, understanding the topics, and making sure that you're leveraging the channels that your audiences are in. If you're not basing any approach or strategy on that, you're in the wrong area.
Okay, so let's kind of try to get specific. Let's come down from 50,000 feet to the 500 feet above ground. Let's
Sure.
let's come up with an example. So a lot of my audience here is independent consultants or people who
Yep.
are running boutique firms with a handful of members. So let's say a consultant, just to pick something, let's say the person does strategic sourcing and procurement, and they
Sure.
typically work on, they probably 15 years of experience doing procurement, strategic sourcing. They've done a lot of different categories, but maybe it centers around direct spend categories for industrial type manufacturing clients. All right.
Hmm.
And let's say that, so they're an independent consultant, so they're not doing a ton of marketing or webinars.
Yep.
They they may be posting, periodically some thoughts about procurement on LinkedIn, but they don't have this massive social media, engine behind them. And they've already reached out to all of the, past clients that they've served and people that they know. And so now they're saying, okay, how do
What do
I
I do now?
how do I expand the circle, right? So what would your
Okay.
thoughts be about for that person on how to do cold outreach? So, we've
Hmm.
done other episodes where we talk about how to reach out to your cool clients, someone that you worked with 10 years ago or 5 years ago, try to reestablish that. But let's say this person says, okay, I can come up with a list of, chief procurement officers at manufacturing companies or
Yep.
SVP of strategic sourcing. I can come up with that list, and I can get their contact info. Maybe I use Apollo or Lucia or
Zoom
Hunter
info,
or
whatever.
something, or maybe
Yeah.
Zoom Info or something, right? So I get the contact info. I have their LinkedIn URL. I've identified them. I know something about procurement in the industry, but I'm not like selling a specific service line like a larger consulting firm might. How would you suggest that person, should they start with a LinkedIn connection request, LinkedIn InMail, just email the person, call the person? What would your suggested sequencing be? And like what would
Hmm.
some actual examples, if it's like a connection request or an email, what would you actually put in the subject line and in the body of that email?
Yeah. So the first thing you're going to want to do is, especially if you've established what your list is and you have a good understanding of exactly who that audience is. So, for example, title, very key and very important, because how you're going to message will change depending on if they are a key stakeholder, if they're a excuse me, a decision maker, if they're an influencer, and so it will change what those messages are across the board. Is to make sure that, and if you're not going to do it through research, that you are doing it through the types of communications that you have with those ideal clients, the ones that you had just referenced that they've already made outreach to. It's asking those questions around issues and topics, because those issues and topics are what is going to resonate when somebody actually opens this email or clicks on the subject line, anything along those lines. And we've learned that because we've done this exact same technique. And in a sense, if and the open rates are different, right? We've tried it with different approaches, with general industry flash line of, hey, consulting space A, so on and so forth. If you're not leading with something that directly resonates with the types of challenges that they're having, they're not going to continue to read through the email. They might not even open it in the first place. And so that's email. I don't recommend sending blind in messages to completely cold prospects. It does not work for the reasons I was just describing earlier, where I have 5 or 6 different folks sitting in my inbox right now trying to make a connection with me. Now, it does make sense to use LinkedIn as a connection a portal where you send out invitations, you try to connect with folks, you comment on their content, but there's a limited amount of time in the day. So that's where that strategy comes to play, and making sure that we've identified the ones that really resonate, where that effort's going to pay off. But
Okay, so
when it comes,
let me just pause you there. So you're saying LinkedIn connection requests you're fine with. So let's say we've identified 500 chief procurement officers for our friend here,
sure.
the independent consultant doing strategic sourcing. So we've identified 500 chief procurement officers at companies in the U.S. Would you suggest sending connection requests to those folks?
If you have something you could potentially provide them in terms of the content that you're putting out and messages that you can interact with them on the social platform. I mean, that's what this is, right? LinkedIn is a connection vehicle of, instead you're at instead of being at a conference and shaking hands in the booth,
Mm-hmm.
you are making those connections on the platform. LinkedIn wants people to be interactive. They want people to be posting native content, so not taking it away. And if you're going to spend time and effort, you need to play by LinkedIn's rules. Now, the place where you're not going to find success is in messages to completely cold prospects who have no idea who you are.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not going to read it. And if they do read it and you don't really hit home on a perfectly targeted message, they're going to throw you into that sea of sameness that they're getting from 15 other people.
Yeah.
So that is where we've kind of we've built that recommendation off of trial and error. We've also built that recommendation off of what we've learned in the research when asking these types of questions to the buyers of consulting services.
So, like, what language would you use in a connection request? Give us 3 or 4 or 5 different ways to, send that connection request to.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, any sort of connection to somebody you may or may not have a secondary or third connection with. So, hey, I saw you're connected with so-and-so. I go way back with them. We had great experience together. Thought it might be great to grow my network here. That kind of message is good. Keep it 2 to 3 sentences. Again, like LinkedIn is a great place for slightly warm type connections. So if you're going to be completely cold, make a reason why you're reaching out to this person. One of the things that I think a lot of folks are trying to use LinkedIn for is they'll send a connection and say, hey, I want to expand my network. And then within a minute and a half after me clicking yes, connect, I'm getting that targeted cold outreach email like I had mentioned to own a franchise or whatever it may be. That's not going to resonate with your audience. So the plain Jane, hey, I'm expanding my network message, I'm ignoring a lot of those now. I need to kind of see where it's the real reason that you're connecting with me for. So it could be as simple as, hey, we have a secondary connection in common, or you're in an industry that we just created a presentation for, might make sense to be in each other's networks. I even, sometimes when I'm connecting with somebody who I don't have a warm introduction to at a conference or a third party or things along those lines, I'll even joke that, and I promise I won't send an in message to you immediately after this. So I've thrown that type of message into those connection requests.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, if someone sends me one of those, like, I'm trying to expand my network, those are immediate declines for me. Like,
yep.
And definitely. And I click the little button, I don't know this person, because
yeah, exactly.
Those are total spam. And they might as well be saying, I'm about to try to like pitch you something and annoy you. When people do that, like, you're trying to expand your network, well, good for you, but like, what do I care?
I'm hearing the same thing that I'm thinking, right, from you. But a great approach, I think, is if there's somebody who's in this ecosystem that you're looking to get connected with, interacting with their content or content that they're involved with, so they at least see you in some form or fashion before you send that connection request, is a very simple step that you can take if you're trying to just grow a network of people on LinkedIn that will enjoy or resonate with the types of things that you're posting, as well as that are a potential prospect down the road.
Yeah. I mean, on that topic, Umbrex has published, well, in my experience, most of the actual client type people that, my listeners want to serve typically aren't posting a lot of their own content. So like chief procurement officer in our made up example, they're usually not posting enough. They're busy. They got a day job. They're not trying to build themselves as an influencer. But so, I often hear that recommendation like, oh, engage with their content. They're often not posting a lot. However, a tip that we had from another episode was to, and actually what Justin Welsh talks about is to follow the people that they may be following and comment on those posts.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Umbrex has published a directory of the top 500 content creators on LinkedIn. And one technique is, okay, in a procurement, find people who are writing about procurement, who are like quote unquote influencers, comment on their stuff and be the first to comment on it when it gets published. And then maybe that chief procurement officer might see your comment and, start paying attention to you. But that's a bit of a roundabout way. One area that you didn't mention, but you could probably talk about is, trying to do cold outreach, but looking at affinity type opportunities. So are you, look for people that are a chief procurement officer who are an alum of your college or your business school, or who, also formerly worked at whatever, Caterpillar or General Electric or something.
Sure.
People who worked at the same firm, people went to the same school. Those are, some ways in addition to looking for the mutual connections. And then it's like, hey, I'm also an alum of whatever, Texas A&M. I'm in the procurement space. I thought I'd reach out. So beyond that, like you mentioned, sort of if you've published some content, I suppose you could say, well, okay, long-winded, but here's my question. What about reaching out to people to do some content creation with them? Like, hey, I'm interviewing 30 chief procurement officers to publish a white paper. Here's a link to the last one I did. Would you be open to participating? Something like that.
Yeah, certainly. I think those types of approaches work. Again, if you're doing it cold through InMessage, you're running into the same challenge. You're likely to just get ignored before they even get to the email. Into the InMessage. That kind of outreach, I think, just translates better to email into what your message is. But in general, that technique is fantastic, especially if you can explain the value of what they're going to get out of it, right? So you already know what their issues are, the types of things they're trying to get addressed. And so your co-content or your conversation is something that's going to be beneficial for both of you. That kind of thing is really successful. That co-marketing, not just in this type of approach, but across marketing strategies, is becoming more and more and more important, especially as we're seeing squeezes and things like just the original content marketing SEO, as Google continues to change the game across the board. So that's a great strategy in general. But again, you're going to fall into the same challenges if you're trying to do it just through a LinkedIn InMessage. It's where the suggestion you brought up of interacting with influencers, the types of things that people would see when they're on LinkedIn. Because remember, you're scrolling through your newsfeed on LinkedIn. You do the same thing on Twitter, Facebook, whatever it may be, or X, sorry, rebrand. But as you scroll down these things, you're more likely to be seen if you are interacting with the types of content that these folks care about. And that goes back to those issues that I was referencing in the start.
Yeah. On email, what are your tips on subject lines and on the length of the email? What have you actually seen work in practice?
Sure. Yeah. I think this is good. So we are at a high level. I'll say everything I hated about InMessage, I have found that we can kind of overcome in the form of email, as in you can get positive ROI.
Really?
Basically.
Okay.
Yep. And I'll long story short, we do see positive ROI in our cold outreach that we do, and that includes like revenues, not just even visibility creation. And I've got some metrics that I can share with you as we go through it. But subject headlines are, if you can tie them directly to a resonating topic, something that really kind of sticks out to them, and it's short. So we're talking 6-8 words or less. That can be good. You can also, we've had success in topic subject lines around events, so conferences or other areas that that folks are going to be involved in. So that's a positive as well.
Like what would be a good subject line for an event? Like, are you going to the JP Morgan conference, or like what?
Sure. Yeah. So one that we actually used for an accounting conference was company name. And of course that was adjusted based off of who the company was, plus Hinge, AAM meetup. And then it was just a question mark at the end of it. And we got a fairly good response rate as well as open rate just by writing that.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
So you're going after whatever, IBM. So it'd be like IBM plus Hinge, meetup at the AAM, whatever that accounting world.
County Association Marketers. But yeah, same thing as, you could certainly use the same approach to any industry.
Okay. Interesting. So making it really specific so it doesn't feel generic, just like, oh, do you want to have a call? No, I don't want to have a call, but oh, you're going to be at this conference, and then they're like, oh, okay, this firm's going to be at the conference. They know they're, this is not just like total generic whatever. Um,
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. What are some
Another,
what are some other
yeah,
event type things?
yeah, yeah. Sorry, events or just other subject lines?
Yeah, events. Let's dive into that one, and then we'll go through some other ones. That's really a gold example that you've shared.
Yeah, and I would say channels in general. So, if you're like Will, like if you were trying to get people to join your podcast, you would take a similar approach, right? You identify the person's name, you say yourself, and podcast interview, question mark, something along those lines. And it's personalized, and it's clear what the call to action is, the type of thing that people will click on, at least to see what the next couple sentences are in what the body of your email is. So, the short subject lines are definitely the right approach.
Mm.
I avoid things like emojis and those kinds of that kind of more, we'll say, casual. And it's just because unless you really know the type of person you're sending that to is going to resonate with getting a smiley face or a skull or whatever it may be, then it's just not, you're not going to see the return. Maybe you'll get one, but you'll piss off 30.
Okay. And then, okay, so share some other subject lines. I love the thing about events, tying it to some event that your firm is going to.
Sure.
What are some other ideas?
So if you're providing a specific service and it is a service that is a well-known challenge of the target audience that you're reaching out to, you can make set headlines around that and use things like the company's name and so forth. So, for example, we have a targeted list that we send elements to of people that are in industries that we know resonate with database decisions. So, artificial intelligence, you name it, right? And so we use subject headlines along the lines of data-driven marketing for company name.
Okay.
So I'm referencing an issue, I'm referencing a service, and I'm tying it personalized to the person who I'm sending it to.
What if your firm has, Hinge publishes a lot of research. What if your firm has published some resource that could be valuable to the person? How would you reach out cold to someone to offer that?
Sure. Well, I wouldn't say anything along the lines of "let me send you my guide."
Okay.
Right.
You would not.
But
okay.
No, not in the subject headline. Certainly, you could talk about it in the body of text, but not in the subject headline. I think what's the topic of the guide? Like, what's the information that you're looking to get across? So we're going back to that issue. So if the guide is a one-stop process to improving procurement efficiencies, something along those lines, it's like improving your procurement process or for blah 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 or something along those lines. It's specifically tied to the issue. And it's the issue or the channel, really, are the two that we've had the most success with.
And then this really gets into the mechanics of it, but in the body of it, let's say that you've published this research on data-driven marketing, perhaps, and
Sure.
Would you include in the email like a link where they can click to download it? Would you add as an attachment? Would you say, hey, would you like me to send it to you? What's the way to do that if you have published some research and you're trying to get someone to engage?
Sure. Well, I find that cold emails to try to get somebody to take a mid-funnel activity, such as download a piece of content or just interact, not necessarily are the most effective things, because you're basically asking them to take even more steps other than just to communicate or contact or respond to you.
Uh-huh.
You're basically making them have to walk down your funnel in a forced manner or fashion. There's better marketing techniques to do that. So what I usually do is I'll reference something along the lines of, and it's not usually in the first outreach, because what I'm really using these outreach emails to is to get conversations going.
Mm-hmm.
So I can then in turn provide my value proposition and all of those types of things. But in my chaser emails, I'll sometimes reference, if you're interested, check out our latest study on this, and then there'll be a link at that point. But that's a secondary or tertiary step of what my goals are when I send an email outreach campaign.
So that would not be in your first email?
No, I mean, my first email is surrounding the idea of I'm trying to get them to hop on a conversation or have a call with me.
Really? Okay. In your first email, you're trying to actually jump right to having a phone call.
And that's where the issues come to play, right? So I'm speaking exactly to what I'm providing in this conversation. So you're going to get value out of this conversation. Nowhere in it does it say, and I'm going to walk you through our proposed process, or our program or our deliverable, whatever it may be, is included. It's more along the lines of, we've worked with folks that are like you, that have this type of challenge. You reference organizations, you tie yourself to something that is going to resonate with them, whether it's an issue, whether it's a topic, whether it's a conference, those kinds of things. And you learn that information through research, you learn that information through investigation. It's just a very targeted type message. We keep them under 150 words. That's really a golden rule for us. Nobody's going to read more than 150 words anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And the action is, if it's of interest, we'd love to set up an intro call and we can share ways that we can help you in this manner with this issue, so on and so forth.
Okay. That's actually somewhat counterintuitive for me. I would have thought that it would be a lighter touch step for someone to just, you send someone's like, hey, we just published this report, whatever, this guide, this playbook that you might find helpful, for someone to click to look at something you published or a PDF.
Sure.
That seems to me a lighter step than saying, oh my gosh, this person wants me to get on a phone call. Like, that seems like a major, asking, to go on a weekend retreat with someone instead of just a coffee date. I mean, it seems like a big step to say, oh, you want to get on a call? No, I don't want to get on a call, but I'll quickly scan your document as a first step.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying, actually, no, your first email, how do you do that? When you ask for a call, do you give them a scheduling link, or do you just say, would you be interested to discuss this, or how do you do that ask for the meeting?
Yeah, I mean, and I could talk a little bit about why we don't use cold outreach emails for content after I answered the question you just asked. I mean, it is very much, you're setting the table, you're connecting with why you're reaching out to them, you're talking about the approach and why it would resonate with them, and then you're saying, if it's of interest, we'd like to connect. And then, yeah, I mean, you could certainly use a Calendly link. Another great approach is to have a set list of times that are available. And if you're going to run these campaigns yourself, you kind of look at and block times in your calendar that you could reference, and you send them as a part of the outreach process. I mean, this is a numbers game, right? So you're going to be looking at how many does it take in order to get open rates? How many does it take in order to get responses? And that's the reason that I typically don't recommend email as a top funnel or mid funnel that doesn't necessarily have a direct sales angle activity. It's because your time and effort is going to be much better spent in areas that is going to give you a much larger visibility range. So, if you're spending time sitting and sending out direct emails to folks to say, hey, download my 50-page guide, you could be using that time in an effort to perhaps get that guide referenced in editorials, or to be guest publishing, or things along those lines, which is going to give you a far greater visibility than just sending it to somebody's email that has never spoken or talked to you. I find that if you are extremely targeted with who you actually send emails to, then you're at that point, you've gone through the effort of identifying why you should be saying it to them, what you should be saying to them, what's the value you're going to be providing to them. Let's just cut to the chase.
All right. So you just jump right into it. It's like, hey, do you want to have a call? Right. This is what we offer. If this is interesting, do you want to get on a call to discuss?
It's really key that you're making sure that you're resonating with them. I mean, because you will get negative responses to this type of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's in a manner like to not run afoul of spam and all of those things. You are basically showing that you made the effort to look up who they were before you researched or before you sent them a message.
Yeah. On that topic, this is some very detailed stuff. Do you include a unsubscribe link on these?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
So you're sending them
And
with,
then,
you're sending them with some
and
kind
then,
of tool like HubSpot or something that has an
yep.
unsubscribe.
Absolutely. Yeah. We send it through a variety of tools. I mean, Hinge uses the Salesforce ecosystem, but you can build this into any of these sending platforms.
Yeah.
And then, as a general rule of thumb, if somebody responds in any form or fashion, that's the end of them receiving emails as a part of this campaign. So a lot of times we'll do things in a 3-message sequence. You'll have your initial email. You'll have a follow-up email that basically says, I'd really love to connect with you if you're interested. And then you kind of repeat your spiel on how the times that you've got to book or your Calendly link or whatever it may be. And then the third sequence email is kind of a rehash of the initial email. Mm-hmm. And we found that is, in a sense, that is about the limit that you can send before you're going to start to see people tip into the negative response category. A lot of times it's that second email is the one that you win with. It shows that you're a real person. It shows that you're directly interested, tied to the issues and elements that you brought up the first time, and that you're serious about providing them some sort of value in that conversation.
And how far apart do you spread these? What's your research determined as sort of the optimal wait time between emails?
3 to 4 days.
3 to 4 days. Okay, interesting. Yep. 3 to 4 weekdays.
Yes, correct. Yeah. You're not going to send these on a weekend.
Right. So, not the next day, but you think it shouldn't be 5 or 6 days. It should be you send it on a Monday, you send it on a Friday, and then you send it the following Wednesday. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, a lot of times it'll end up stretching over 3 calendar weeks. Okay. Good way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
If you're going to do this sequence, so a Friday, then a Wednesday, and then early the following week.
Is there a best time of day or best time of week? Best day of the week?
Yeah.
To send these?
Yeah. It's usually in the mid mornings. You don't want to be the first thing in the inbox, and you certainly don't want to be at the end of the day. But that's going to run. It's very similar to when you see the best open rates for any sort of outreach, email outreach. If you're sending consistent content, for example, or invites to participate in a research study or webinars, it's that mid-morning time frame where if somebody's not going to get to it, they'll see it at their lunch break or things along those lines. That seems to really be a good time to send content. That's a general rule of thumb with email anyways.
I did not know that. I thought that maybe sending it like 7:45 or something before their workday, so it's sort of the last thing that came in overnight when they get to their desk. It's sort of, but you're saying mid-morning when they're in the flow of it already, they're at their desk, and then if they don't get it in the flow, they maybe are checking their email at lunchtime. So you're saying mid-morning is best, 9:30 or 10 o'clock.
So, I mean, one of the things that we'll do consistently is test. So there are going to be changes in focus and so forth. But, I mean, what I have found with this type of email is that you don't want it to necessarily be blended in with everything that came over the night, especially if somebody is very quickly going through and archiving or deleting emails, right, which is a step I think all of us take in the morning. I have found that, if it comes in as a standalone and, it has a subject headline that resonates, things along those lines, then it'll get the click. And that's the important thing here, right? We're just trying to get past that initial eye screening. So it's morning, certainly, and there's definitely benefits to having things in inboxes at the beginning of the day. But for this type of thing, I have found, and what we typically do is in the mid-morning.
And what about what day of the week?
Oh, yeah, we've tried every day. I would say that I don't necessarily have any statistical significant success on a Wednesday versus a Friday or things like that. But I do have statistical success that shows that second follow-up email or the third follow-up email will get a better open rate than the first one.
And should that second email be a kind of reply all thing from the first one, or is it a fresh
new email?
Virgin?
No, Yeah, we send the initial email along with it because you're referencing the initial email in the message itself.
Yeah, so it's like a reply to the first one.
Yep.
All right, interesting. Okay. Um, so you kind of lay out what you offer. You say, would you like all I my intuition, and I'm curious to hear your reaction, is that including a scheduling link or a calendar link in there is a little bit overbearing, and maybe it's
Sure.
easier to ask someone, just say, hey, would you be open to a discussion, where all they have to do reply is just say yes, right? Or maybe they'll copy their
Sure.
assistant, or they'll say, yeah, here's my Calendly link. Like saying, would you like a call? And by the way, do all this work and go to my Calendly and find a time that works for you and schedule
Yeah.
it. That feels like a little bit like putting a lot.
The Yeah, the calendar link is not the only thing. It's why I said what we'll typically do is block times,
Hmm.
and we suggest those times, or just let me know if you're interested in a conversation. So you're kind of just giving them the link as an option, I
Yeah.
guess is the best way. It
Hmm.
is not the only way, and I would agree with you entirely. If somebody's just sending me a calendar link and that's the only way I can have any sort of connection with them, that does put me off.
Yeah. Okay. So this is very, very tactical stuff. All right.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what you asked for, right, Will?
yeah. All right. And then, how do you think about, maybe using a separate email domain that you've warmed up? So if you get a lot of people marking you as spam, it's not going to
That's right.
infect your primary domain. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we'll do with completely cold outreach is we'll actually sometimes leverage partners who um, will stand up an email, separate email domains and those things that would eventually get redirected to our primary email as a part of the send. Because you're right, you will get marked as spam when you do these types of outreaches. Now, when we're sending something that's a little warmer or it's directly tied to an event or a conference or things like that, it's
Hmm.
less concerning. And you'll see that in terms of general open rate and so forth. It's because it's, at that point, you're already kind of explaining exactly what the outreach is for versus, hey, I have a service or you have an issue or things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, in those circumstances, we will kind of distribute the load across multiple across multiple emails.
So you'll get some sort of alternate email domains that have Hinge in there somewhere, but it's not your primary day-to-day email address.
Right. And in those circumstances, like I said, we're going to leverage third parties because if I'm having to send emails through our system, it's typically going to go through obviously our email. So if I'm using my Pardot, it's going to be attached to my email. But if I'm trying a larger campaign, for
Hmm.
example, in those circumstances, we'll go out and distribute that across a variety of domains.
Where do you get the contact info for these larger domains? Are you using, Zoom Info or Apollo or Lucia or one of these services, or something else?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it'll come through data vendors, but it'll be tailored to that research I referenced at the start of our conversation. So we are looking at in-depth thinking in terms of who are the decision makers, the influencers, the key stakeholders, the roles, the titles, the company sizes, the industries, you name it. And we're good with that because we've spent so much time and effort investing into understanding these spaces. But for folks who haven't gone through that process, it's really important to kind of look across who represents your target audience, who represents the types of folks you want to do more work with. And then in that circumstance, you can start to build profiles. Like this is not I'm sending hundreds of thousands of emails
Hmm.
approach. This is very targeted. And if I get somebody who responds, they're going to be qualified, right? And that's basically how nitty gritty we get with these outreach campaigns.
Okay. What sort of metrics, would be typical, would be awesome, in terms of response rate on these? So, and these are ones, like you said, it's not 100,000 you're sending out. It's maybe, well, you tell me how many you might send out. What would like a decent open rate be, a decent response rate be, and a decent, if you send out 1,000 of these, I don't know how many you send, like how many meetings might you get, um, if you send 100 or 1,000 emails?
It really does vary based on the campaign. So we like to kind of look at them in aggregate. So, for example, that campaign that we did around the accounting conference, was north of 50% open rate. It was massive.
Wow. Okay.
And that is just, I mean, and that's visibility, right? So, I mean, we didn't get 50% response rate, not even close, but people saw that our company was there, that we were exhibiting, that we were presenting, that we had a speaking opportunity there. That's just targeted gold in terms of getting in the eyes and minds of your target audience, right? But on the other end, when we're doing these more general industry focused outreach to a persona in terms of title or company size, we're not going to get even close to that. We'll be in like a 20s or 30s. To give you an idea, our last 6-month open rate is around 36%. I just looked it up.
That's pretty decent. I mean, that's higher than I would have expected. That's very good.
Yep. And that is from trial and error. When we first started doing this, without being as focused as I've been describing, we were half of that.
Yeah.
Quarter of it.
I mean, even 15% is a pretty good open rate for cold outreach. Now, out of that 35, so you send out 100 emails, you get a 35% open rate, which would be amazing. How many meetings might you expect to actually schedule out of those? Or maybe the first step would be like, how many people just reply and say, oh, that's interesting, but not right now, or no, I don't. How many replies would you get, and then how many meetings would you get?
Yeah, I mean, we have some of the other metrics we establish and we look at include referral or conditional, or basically things that say yeah but kind of things. We're tracking right around 4% on replies over the last 6 months, and it really does. It does kind of vary, like I said, like you'd see with the open rate. There's a pretty consistent delta. Like when one goes up, the other goes up. And then from there, positive lead rate. So as in like, yes, I want to jump on a conversation and there's a direct connection. We're right around 0.5%. Okay. So if we sent 200 emails, we'd get one response.
Get one meeting.
Yep.
Okay. So 200 emails to get one meeting. Okay. That's a helpful benchmark for us to keep in mind. So you should not send out 10 or 20 and expect, I'm going to get some 4 or 5 meetings. This is a big numbers game. So 200 emails, you get one meeting.
And that's very much across these different campaigns. So I'm giving you everything in aggregate. When we've run, like, for example, that conference email, which was really successful for us, we had 2 or 3% in terms of positive responses. So it was definitely a higher number.
Wow. Okay. Now, how do you then, let's say, like, what sort of tracking and follow-up do you do? So let's say you send one of these emails and the person opens it but doesn't respond. So, yeah, or let's say they open it and they do respond, but they say, yeah, no, not right now, or no, we're good, thanks. How do you follow up that person? Do you put it in your system and track it somehow and say, put them onto another campaign 3 months from now or something? So talk to me about that.
Sure. Well, like we talked a little bit about unsubscribe and spam and all of that. If somebody says no for any reason or any fashion, we're not just dumping them into our mailing list or anything like that. That's definitely falling into a spam-like tendency. They have to give us a response of some sort that's conditional or positive for us to add them to the list. That being said, that is a data point, right? And if you're tracking these things in a CRM, even if they're saying no and you're not mailing them, but they're still added to your list, these are potential for retargeting later down the road. So you can use things like the Google Ads systems or LinkedIn or things along those lines that allow you to put in profiles or contacts or things along those lines and in a sense target them with advertising later on. So we do keep track of who says no, but it is not to go and then continue to spam them with additional email messages.
But what about the people that open the email and they just don't respond? That you said 35% open it, 4% respond.
Sure.
So 31% are opening it and not responding. What happens to them?
And that's where the campaign angle comes in. So we're not going to run a campaign indefinitely, right? You're just continuing to just message the exact same profile on month in, month out, so on and so forth. We go at these with a couple month cadence, and then if we'll move on to different campaigns or different testing or different topical issues, for example. And that's where the topics and all those kinds of things can come to play. People that open it, they can very much likely and will be folks that we would target as part of a re-engagement campaign later on. And in that circumstance, we might go a little bit further with what that offer is in terms of trying to tease them with other types of things that would resonate. So issues, topics, so forth. And in a sense, you're not at that point completely unknown because they did read your email the first time.
Do you reference your earlier outreach, or does that feel too?
Yeah, we don't. And I've kind of shied away from things that look like we're just obsessively messaging somebody, because I mean, you got to think about like the kind of email that you would respond to, right? Well, like if somebody sent you something and would resonate and you click on it, if they were just like, hey, it's me again, it's been 6 months.
Right.
I mean, I'm like, no, there's a reason I didn't respond to you in the first place. But you know what? You know what does change over time is the types of services or needs that your clients might have that they didn't have the first time. So for example, as a part of that re-engagement campaign, we were focused on, we have website services are one of our key deliverables, and we provide a high performance website that's designed specifically for professional services organizations with the types of tools and templates and elements built in, so they're able to rock and roll with a marketing strategy. We sent a re-engagement campaign to folks that did not respond the first go around in the architecture, engineering, and construction vertical. And this go around, we've gotten a few leads of folks that just in that 6-7 months went from, I don't really care about the types of things that you mentioned in this email, to seeing something like, oh, wow, you guys do websites? I had somebody who actually is a big time consumer of our content. I looked in our CRM, lots of downloads, lots of attending webinars, so on and so forth. Her response was basically, holy crap, Hinge does websites, ? Which just tells you that even an agency like ours that spends a boatload of time trying to explain our services to folks and educate them, you'll still sometimes run into that issue. But now I'm actually in the process of, I was actually, before we hopped on the call today, building out our scope for them. So that's something we wouldn't have had we not done this approach.
We didn't really give you a chance here. We just jumped right into this episode, but let's give you some space here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what Hinge does? Give us a quick overview of your services.
Yeah, and I really do hope that the information that we've been talking through, it is tactical, certainly, but it's, hopefully it's the types of nuggets that get people energized and thinking about making adjustments across the board. And that type of mindset is exactly what we do and how we talk about ourselves. So like you said, we're focused in professional services. So Hinge is exclusively working with organizations that are professional services or selling into professional services. And the biggest difference between a professional services buyer and another buyer, for example, a consumer buyer, is this is not an impulse buy. Nobody is buying professional services on a whim.
It was at the checkout. It was in the checkout aisle. I just picked it up. Right?
Coke or Pepsi, right? Let's change our colors and all of that. Now this is a buy that's based on this type of person can solve the problem that keeps me up at night. And that kind of thing requires trust. It requires a reputation. It requires visibility. And that is why everything I've talked about today, like I mentioned, we're looking at this as part of a comprehensive strategy. And we help organizations do that. We help organizations understand what are the techniques that they should utilize, what are the benchmarks they should be hitting, how should they be talking about themselves in terms of positioning, messaging, so forth. And then that all fades into the types of efforts that you might expect from a marketing agency, like brand work, for example, or websites, content creation, collaterals, you name it. And then for organizations that we've worked with, we also can continue to support them in terms of implementation. And that comes in all shapes and sizes, from helping some of them as a full-time marketing outsource down to, hey, we're just kind of your fractional CMO advisor. And all of this is built and customized to the client, to their needs.
Amazing. And where can listeners find you online?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just don't send me a blind in message. But you can certainly send me a connection request, Joe Pope. You can find us at Hinge Marketing on LinkedIn. Our website is hingemarketing.com. And like I mentioned, there's a boatload of content, research, and information that is extremely helpful for folks. We are a practice what we preach organization, unlike a lot of agencies. So when we are recommending techniques and tools and all of those kinds of things, you're going to see us do them as well. And it's because they work and we're able to test them, see what works, see what's successful, and then bring that benefit to our clients.
All right. So listeners, unless you're selling franchises, you're encouraged to reach out to Joe on LinkedIn and send him a connection request. Joe, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. I love the tactical advice, and your content is great. I've consumed a lot of Hinge content and seen a lot of your surveys and reports. Very valuable stuff. Great speaking with you today.
Yeah, Will, thanks so much. Looking forward to the opportunity to do it again sometime.